The regular meeting of the Mishawaka Common Council for Monday, February 7th, 2022 will please come to order. Those of you who are in attendance with us this evening, good evening. Please take a minute, if you would, and check your cell phones to make sure that you've put it on vibrate, or silent. And then for those of you who are participating remotely, we once again welcome you to our meeting virtually. To that end, members of the public participating remotely are asked to place their microphone on mute during the meeting, with the exception of any public hearing. At the appropriate point in the public hearing, I will invite the public to unmute their microphone for purposes of submitting such comments as they wish to make, one person at a time. All persons wishing to make public comments will be asked to first state their name and address for the record, and after completing his or her public comments, members of the public will once again be asked to place their microphone on mute. And we thank everyone, whether you're here in person or not, for your cooperation. This evening, we have a special guest. Toby Prince is going to come forward to the podium and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then once Toby and all the rest of us have finished with the pledge, we'll ask that you remain standing for a moment of silence in remembrance of former Mishawaka City Councilman and longtime Mishawaka resident Jody Keever, who, as my friend Mr. Benicki stated in the pre-meeting, was an all-around good guy who really loved Mishawaka. So, Toby, if you want to come forward and lead us in the pledge, then we'll remain standing for a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And thank you, Toby. Hopefully that checks off one of the boxes so you can get the next badge to go on that sash there. All right, excellent. Well, we're glad you're here. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. DeMade?
Here.
Mr. Hazen?
Here.
Mr. Mamalenti?
Here.
Mr. Benicki?
Here.
Mr. Emmons?
Here.
Mr. Belovich?
Here.
Mr. Compton?
Here.
Mrs. Volker? Mr. Hicksonbaugh?
Here. Approval of the minutes of our regular meeting of January 17th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections? Then hearing none, the minutes will stand approved as received from the clerk's office. Petitions, communications, remonstrance, and memorial.
Yes, Mr. President, we have petition number 2022-01. This is a petition for rezoning classification to rezone R1 and C4 to C4 auto-oriented commercial for the proposed car wash, drive and shine, northwest corner of Lincoln Way and Bittersweet Road. This petition is signed by Haj Tarani. We have petition number 2022-02 to the honorable members of the Common Council. This is a petition for right-of-way vacation. This is to vacate for planned adjacent car wash development, drive and shine, Wayne and Pennsylvania Avenue. This is also signed by Taj Harani. We also have the matter of presentation of voided two-year-old checks that is to be presented to the council according to Indiana Code 5-11-10.5. All checks outstanding and unpaid for a period of 2 years as of December 31st of each year are voided and receipted back into their original fund. No action by the council is required.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the council with regard to that matter? Then the record will reflect that we have complied with the statute. Report of special committees, of which there are none that I'm aware of this evening, so we'll move into ordinances on first reading.
Proposed ordinance number 2022-05, an ordinance amending ordinance 5769, an agreement between the City of Mishawaka and the employees of the Mishawaka Utilities, represented by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local number 1392. This contract would run from January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024, and the petitioner is requesting a second reading at this evening's meeting.
Thank you. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to suspend our regular council rules and hold first and second reading on proposed ordinance 2022-05 this evening as requested by the petitioner.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to suspend our regular council rules and hold first and second reading on proposed ordinance 2022-05 this evening. Any additional questions or comments from the council?
I have one.
Mr. Hazen?
Does not pass, it does not go, does it affect the IBW workers in pay or anything?
You know, I will ask the representatives of the administration to step up and address Mr. Hazen's question. So, Ms. Kyle, Mr. Rosmer, whomever wants to step up to the podium and address it, address Mr. Hazen's question. That's a good place to be.
So language change?
If you could start out with your name and...
Oh, sorry. Kevin Wasmer, Mishawaka Utilities Electric Division Manager. The language is still the same. We just moved it from where it was located in the beginning of the contract to the emergency only. The purpose of the language was more of to get the guys to take calls after hours for emergencies, kind of like a benefit to if you come in at 4 o'clock in the morning, come in and go to work, and you stay all day long, you stay at your time and a half. So that's the higher rate of pay once it's established. When it was in the front of the contract, kind of addressed everything which would have been scheduled overtime. So we didn't want it to be scheduled overtime 2 hours before the start of a day. You start at 5 o'clock, you'd stay at time and a half when you were scheduled to be there. This is more to give them a reward for taking calls after hours.
So is it being practiced right now, or are you waiting for this to be passed?
Well, we haven't had the situation yet, but
Okay.
yes, it was anticipated to be practiced now, because in the front of the contract, they met and discussed it and said they thought it was this, which meant it would apply for everything. And then we discussed it, and they said, no, we understand it's just for after-hour emergencies. It would be better if we moved it. So we agreed to move it, to make it a little more clear, so it's not so confusing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other follow-up questions with respect to the issue that Mr. Hazen has raised? Mrs. DeMay?
Good evening.
Hello.
So if a situation would arise where this would take place and it doesn't pass tonight for the first and second, what would the situation be for the workers? Would they still get that pay?
Yeah, the way the contract is now, it still would apply. So if they get called out tonight as we speak and they work, it would still be at time and a half, because it is a higher rate of pay. It was just to move it so that everybody was under the same page, that it was for emergency call-outs, just to make it clearer than putting it in the front of the contract. So it doesn't actually change the pay, it just makes it a little more clear that it's not for overtime, scheduled overtime, or snow plow, snow removal, if we call you in at 6 o'clock to come remove the parking lot, we don't have to pay a time and a half the whole time you're at work. Because it's not an emergency, it's scheduled overtime, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Compton?
To clarify, this was collectively bargained, correct?
Correct.
And all we're doing is approving at the council level, putting it into ordinance form and approving that contract. But you got, the IBW and the city of Mishawaka have agreed to this, signed off, and now this is just this formality.
Yeah, that's correct. We've agreed to put it under the emergency call-out.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a comment, if I may.
Do we want to let Mr. Wasmer sit down before you share your comment, Mrs. DeMay, or? Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions or comments, Mrs. DeMay?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just find the first and second readings collectively not fair to the voting members of the city, or any member of the city, where we are voted in as a body here to approve these ordinances. They don't get a chance to thoroughly read through them, look through them, do some work on them, and let us know what they feel about it. This is happening, this is the second time in 2 meetings that this has happened, and it's happened several times in the prior year. And I just feel that the citizens of Mishawaka are being shortchanged when something like this happens. They don't get a fair shake. They don't get the chance to read and to make their judgment, contact their representative to let them know how they feel.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council?
I would second that feeling, that that's how I feel too.
Thank you.
This is not only a council rule that we should take 2 meetings to pass something, but it's state law. It says we should take 2 meetings. It does give us an out if it's unanimously passed. But I honestly don't, it's nothing against this, or I don't know how I'm going to vote, because I feel like we should really give the public the chance to have 2 meetings to come and talk.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Well, whatever the vote is this evening, I think that there is a consensus, is not unanimity on the part of the council, that our preference would be, and I suspect you would, the administration would share this sentiment with us. Our preference would be that these collective bargaining agreements be brought to us in a different order or timing. And I think ideally, and sometimes all of us up here have been involved in bargaining on some level. And sometimes the year runs out on you, and despite everybody's best intentions, you just run up against the deadline, and that's understandable. But that should be the exception rather than the rule. And I think it is clear that our strong preference, no matter what happens this evening, is that we revisit that process and do everything that's physically possible, humanly possible, to bring these agreements to us one time only as a complete package that have the changes highlighted, as Mrs. Kyle was good enough to do for us this evening with regard to language that was deleted and then indicating new language where it's placed in it. So it sounds like it's a process issue, but I would agree with my colleagues that there are some substantive issues as well. And although we have the flexibility to suspend our rules, I think this council at least would prefer to do that fewer times rather than more frequently as we move forward. So whatever happens this evening, if we can work together to accomplish that, I think that we'd appreciate it. And with that, are there any additional questions or comments? Mr. Belovich?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I'll vote in favor of this tonight, but as Tony has said, you know, this has happened more frequently, and one of the issues that could solve that problem is, from a timing standpoint, if it's necessary, start negotiations a little earlier.
Thank you. Well said. Any other questions or comments from the council? Then a motion has been made and seconded to suspend our council rules and hold first and second reading on proposed ordinance 2022-05 this evening. If there are no other questions or comments, then I will call for the question.
Question.
And Madam Clerk, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on this question this evening.
Mrs. DeMade,
No.
do I need to go further?
By virtue of one no vote, then, in compliance with state law as well as our council rules, this matter will not be heard under first and second reading, but instead will go through our normal process and will be acted upon at a subsequent council meeting. So with that occurrence, then I will assign proposed ordinance number 2022-05 to the Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you. This evening, there are no resolutions, so we'll move into ordinances on second reading.
Proposed ordinance 2022-02. An ordinance amending ordinance 5763, fixing the salaries of all employees of the city of Mishawaka, except Mishawaka Park Department, elected officials, and the Mishawaka Utilities for the city of Mishawaka, Indiana, for the year beginning January 1st, 2022. This is amending the salary ordinance for senior city planner and senior planner.
Thank you. May we have the committee report, please?
Yes, Mr. President. To the members of the Common Council of the City of Mishawaka, the Committee on Budget and Finance, to whom was referred the matter of proposed ordinance number 2022-02, report that they have examined said matter and that in their opinion, it should be adopted. This is signed by a majority of the committee, and I move for its acceptance.
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to receive the committee report. Any additional questions or comments from the council? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Well, we now move into the second reading and public hearing on proposed ordinance 2022-02. Madam Controller.
Good evening, Mr. President, members. Rebecca Rebecca McGuire, City Controller. Still working on that one, unfortunately. I'm here to amend the salary ordinance. The planning department had restructuring, and I put in mistakenly one position at a higher level and then one position at a lower level, lower salary, and this is correcting this.
Thank you. Any questions for the controller? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? If you would, please come forward to the podium. Then is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? If you would, please unmute your microphone and state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone physically present who wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed ordinance? If so, please come forward. And is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed ordinance? Are there any council members who wish to speak? If not, then I call for the question.
Question.
Madam Clerk, would you please poll the council?
Mrs. DeMade?
Yes.
Mr. Hazen?
Yes.
Mr. Mamalenti?
Yes.
Mr. Benicki?
Yes.
Mr. Emmons?
Yes.
Mr. Belovich?
Yes.
Mr. Compton?
Yes.
Mrs. Volker? I'm sorry. I'm not going to hear anything, am I? Mr. Hicksonbaugh?
Yes.
Proposed ordinance passes 8-0. Proposed ordinance number 2022-03. An ordinance declaring an emergency and determining the expenditure of additional funds for the year ending December 31st, 2022. This is in the fire department and the assistant chief for $125,000. And I do have the proof of publications for both the Tribune and the Enterprise.
Thank you. Duly noted for the record, Madam Clerk. May we have the committee report, please?
Yes, Mr. President. To the members of the Common Council, City of Mishawaka, your Committee on Budget and Finance, to whom was referred the matter of proposed ordinance number 2022-3, have examined said matter, and in their opinion, it should be adopted. And this is signed by a majority of the committee, and I move for its acceptance.
Second.
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to approve the committee report. Any additional questions or comments from the council? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We'll now move into second reading and public hearing on proposed ordinance 2022-03. Madam Clerk, Madam Controller.
I don't want that job.
I understand.
I don't want yours.
Right. That's all right.
We do well together.
We do. Good evening again. This is additional appropriation for an additional assistant chief in the fire department, approximately $125,000, which is made up of the salary of $79,223. There's pension in there. There's a clothing stipend, and I've also have added health insurance at the higher rate as a family plan, because I expect a current fireman to be promoted to assistant chief, and then a new employee will be added to the fire staff, sworn officer. So that's where these numbers are from, and it's much simpler to put it in one line instead of trying to separate it all out in the different lines. And Chief Woodward is here to discuss the details of needing the additional staffing.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Compton?
So this dollar amount that we see of 125,000 is all encompassing between the new assistant chief and the person that, and bringing on a person to replace them.
Right, because the
It makes sense, Becky. When I first looked at it, it seemed like a lot.
yeah,
But now that makes sense.
yeah, because the promoted person is already having pension and clothing and insurance, and we're going to have additional costs
Thank you.
with the new employee.
Thank you. Other questions for the controller? Becky, thank you for the information that you and the chief provided in advance of this, and there is some obvious logic to adding this position, with regard to the job requirements that the chief, I'm sure, will go over with us. One question I have, though, is that logic aside, is there a reason why we weren't able to add this position during the normal budgetary process this past fall, rather than dealing with it after the first of the year?
My understanding is that was still in discussions. It had been brought up, but administration had not finalized everything and made the final decision on that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the controller? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor, if you would, please come forward to the podium.
Good evening, Brian Woodward, Fire Chief. Thank you for having me tonight. Yes, to answer your question, President Hickson-Ball, this was something that was in discussion. Manpower is always in discussion with the administration. It was something we got worked out towards the end of the year, but it was so late in the year to not push it through the way that you were just discussing. We felt it was best to wait till after the first of the year. That way we could follow the process of the two-meeting process and go through first and second reading. So, and then I had a family thing going on at the end of the year there, so that kind of tied up and screwed me up for January getting this through then. So I do apologize for that, and normally my letters to you guys are a little longer and a little more thorough, so I do apologize about that same time. I was a little pressed, but yeah, this position is very important to us. We say all the time, we put in our State of the City, you can never train enough for a job that can kill you. Some simple facts that our training last year was up 29%, over 33,000 hours by our department, cumulatively by all the members. That's up from 26,000 in 2020, it was at 24,000 some change in 2019, and 19,000 in 2018. I'm sure President Zappi is here, he can tell you that I am a training guy. I believe in training, it's the most important thing we can do. There's 5 pillars to making our job work. Hire good people, give them good policies to follow, train them with the policies, provide the necessary supervision, and then you follow up with the discipline if they're not being supervised. We're very good at all those pillars, except for the training part so much. Our job's gotten so busy now, with all this training going on, the thing we're starting to lose is everyone operating the same at all times. So right now the job is shared between our operations, he's the operations and training chief, which means the truck's rolling down the street 24/7, all that daily stuff is his responsibility. Purchasing is his responsibility. And then training, making sure everyone's trained the same is his responsibility. There's over 15 total types of medical certifications, 10 fire certifications that we got to maintain continuous hours for. You have to meet state, local, ISO, NFPA, regulations, OSHA, mandatory trainings every year. The workload has overrun one person now. We do have a battalion chief that assists him in these responsibilities, but every time the battalion chief works, most time he can get that stuff done is off-duty time. So now we're either paying him comp time or overtime to come in and doing that, taking away from his off-duty days, from doing his stuff. Speaking of our people, why this is so important, so this happened to me randomly. I was going through some numbers, but I started looking at, so we have 5 people retiring between this year and next year. So with those 5 people leaving, it's about 165 years of experience walking out the door on us. The average age of employment now has been 13 years because we've gotten so young. I've hired 34 people in the last 5 years. 31 people today have their 20 years in that could retire. So of those 31, probably 15 to 18 of us are close to the age of retirement, walking out and collecting. So within the next 3 to 5 years, I foresee the majority of those being gone as well. 57 of the 108 in suppression, 107 right now, 57 of them have less than 10 years on the job, 10 or less. Only 50 people have more than 10 years on the job. So to make sure that these people with less than 10 years on the job see 32 years on the job, we've got to train them. The world we live in today is not the same world I came into in the fire service 27 years ago. I don't think anybody can argue that. We're facing things today we never thought we'd face. We're busier than ever. Last year was a record year. We did 9,000, almost 9,700 runs, 9658. We're up 17%. We're already up 40% this month from the month of January over last year's January. January is our second busiest month ever for calls in the history of our department. December was the busiest month. So it's been nonstop. We went from starting the year last year at 22, 23 runs a day. We've been clipping out about between the high 30s and low 40s. We're busy. So with COVID's also presented a ton of training challenges for us, which our people have been great about. I mean, they've taken it all in stride. I can't, like I said, you guys hear me say it all the time, I can't give our people enough kudos. But you got the greatest men and women working for the fire department in the history of the fire department, in my opinion. The things they've done to make sure they're ready and prepared is the best they can be, you know, but it's created a lot of online training, a lot of in-house training. Now that we're going to hopefully things are going to start going the other way, it's time to get out and start getting our hands dirty a lot more. We're in the process of putting some cans together to build a training tower. We can do a lot more live burns, a lot more rappelling, a lot more of that stuff. Where this training chief's important for that, he's the guy who's there every day, make sure all the safety procedures are followed, make sure all the JPRs, the way we train and want it done, are accomplished and followed. Right now, we can't dedicate that person there all the time, every time. And so it gets to be a problem. So if you're on overtime today and you're working on a shift you're not normally on, pulling hose should be pulling hose the exact same way when off your shift. Well, that doesn't always necessarily happen. When you come off of a truck, your expectations off the back of the truck or the front of the truck should be the same on another shift as it is on your shift. Right now, it's hard to make sure that's always working that well. It's all synced up that well. Because of the busyness, there's no one there who can just dedicate 100% of their job to that. Another big project we're trying to get through is our training software, Target Solutions. We're working with the state, so for our medical certifications, every 2 years you have to renew. And President Zappi can tell you, that gets to be a pain sometimes. You're going through, you gotta get signatures, you're doing all this recording, you gotta go through different layers, get stuff signed off. Well, we're working with the state, that they'll be able to pull our training requirements right out of our in-house software. So we'll give them rights to it. They can go in, they can just start pulling people's out every 2 years. It's an automatic download for them. It's a way more efficient, way better way to do things. It's a great way to do business, but we don't have the person put in charge of running that project for us right now. So Chief Ray's been doing as best he can, and he's been doing an amazing job. He really has. But he's beat. He's tired. He's old. I know he's listening, so I can say it to him. But it's just that. It's overwhelmed one person to do what's needed. A good example, everyone in the county, we operate off the same incident command SOGs now, same policies. So battalion chief from South Bend shows up in Mishawaka, he can run a house fire and use the same language our battalion chief does in Mishawaka. The way that comes about is all the operations chiefs from all the departments in the county get together, they go through and they vet the policies. When they get the package they like, it comes up to the fire chiefs. We're all great with it. We sign off. It goes right to the training chiefs, who then go out and train all their departments. So Chief Ray goes from the meeting to create all this into the meeting where it gets approved. Then he goes with all the training chiefs and has to push it out to everybody else and get all the training developed and pushed out. Well, now we got no one worrying about the operations of stuff. So it's, like I said, when we're busier, I hate to think, because busy is what we're here for. We're here to make calls. We're here to do our stuff. As a city, as a department, our most important thing, though, is to provide for the safety and the quality of our people. Make sure that they're going home every day at 7 in the morning and they all retire happy and healthy. The most important way to do that is just train them. So I hope you guys consider this. It's, like I said, I can't speak highly enough of how well our people have worked through this, especially these last couple of years. They've been dynamic, man. They've just been amazing. So I think their training hours speak for themselves. They are committed. I just think that as an administration, that as the fire chief, we need to give that equal commitment back to our people. Have someone overseeing them, make sure that they're going to be safe and taken care of that way. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Woodward? Mr. Mammolati.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief. First and foremost, I haven't had a chance to say face-to-face, extremely sorry for your family's loss.
Thank you.
What you experienced this past couple months, so thoughts and prayers have been with you guys. So
Thank you.
thank you for all the information that you provided. I'm a strong believer in training as well in any profession. I think the more you're trained, the better you'll be prepared to do the job that we're asked to do in any profession. The question that I have to ask, and I apologize for the lack of terminology, what was the class that class rating that we were trying to achieve as a citywide in terms of training hours? et
The
cetera?
ISO rating?
Yes.
Right now, we're a 2.
Okay.
Which is the second highest you can have. There's a 1. We missed a 1 by 2.25 points, something like that. Where if we'd had some of the training stuff in place, we could have achieved a 1. And a lot gets made about the ISO rating, but really what makes the ISO rating happen is several things. It's dispatch center, it's our water department's a big part of it, and then it's our people. it's the training hours they do, it's the work they put in and stuff they do on the streets that reflects on them. They went from a 3 to a 2. I mean, they did all the work. We put the papers together for them, but they did the work to make it happen. So right now, we're at 2. We're up for review in a couple of years, I think. I see us anticipating making a leap.
Great. And I just want to make a comment too. I've seen it firsthand, spending some time at one of the houses. You know, just the amount of calls that you described, that you guys are getting called on, how difficult it is to squeeze in those training hours. So I think a dedicated person may help get that going and make sure every minute counts. But while I have you on the floor, I just wanted to congratulate you and your members. Over the weekend, a neighbor of mine had a pretty significant accident at his home, and he was explaining to us the situation and how impressed he was with the response that he received, and the quality and response time was outstanding. So please pass that on to your folks, and thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions, Mr. Compton?
Yeah, Chief, thank you very much for filling us in on all of this, and it's appreciated, and I think it's needed. And I'm glad to hear that we're not taking away from the normal crew, adding a management role, and not
Correct.
taking away from a normal crew. But that, we often hear during negotiations that we need to expand the crew. And I just ask you to continue to work on that, continue to push for that,
Yeah.
to expand our manpower. And, we need more management folks, but, as well as you have said, we need more people out there in the field too. So
Yep, absolutely. As a matter of fact, me and President Zappi were having a little conversation today.
thank you.
So-
And thank you for continuing that conversation.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, I want to thank you for your presentation and giving us an update of what you're planning on doing. This new position, have you have a person that's in mind for this job?
We have several people. We'll kind of open it up a little bit, take some names, let them put in. But we've got qualified people.
Well, I know that. I'm just asking whether there was a person that stepping up from like the captain or something like that, with Chief Ray.
We're going to open it up,
Okay,
and we anticipate a couple people.
that's fine, that's
Yep.
fine, that's fine. And the title will be Assistant Chief of Training?
Yep,
That's
correct.
That's the title. And where will they be stationed, at Force, or were they down,
Station at Force.
Station 4?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Chief, appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Hazen?
First of all, I want to say you guys have always amazed me on the training that you've done. You've always done a great job on the training. Secondly, I wish we would look at civilian posts more than taking guys from, what I say, off the truck. I mean, we could probably hire a retired fireman or something like that, wouldn't have to pay his pension, probably get him at a little bit of better price. And we have some issues with, in my opinion, the police department doing that too. We create all these positions and then we take policemen off the road and put them in them, where we could maybe use some civilians. Totally support it. I think you're right. You've always done an amazing job training, like I said, so I'll be voting yes for it, but I wish we would look at a civilian position more.
Thank you. Other questions or comments for the chief? And Chief, thank you for the information. You always do a good job, including the information that you shared with us this evening of fleshing out the details. That's much appreciated. A couple comments to piggyback on Mr. Compton's statement. There is the obvious logic to this position, and you've done a good job of articulating it yet again this evening, the need for it. But I also agree with he and with you that we need to also look at the number of bodies that we have jumping on a fire truck every day and make sure that we're where we need to be with that. I had some of the same questions that Mr. Hazen had, and I think back to when we had a civilian handling training, not just unique to one public safety department, as I recall, but across the board, which may or may not have been the most workable system. But I thought that made some sense at the time. To follow up on that, you mentioned with your current assistant chief how the duties have morphed over time, and he took on some additional responsibility as needs changed. Clearly, training is going to be the primary responsibility of this position, but do you have some other add-ons, maybe some loose odds and ends that you anticipate are going to be assigned to this job description as well?
Absolutely. So some of the purchasing he'll be able to take away from Chief Ray, which is the training-related types of things he can handle. That way Chief Ray can function, or basically focus on more of the bigger purchases, like equipment for the trucks and when we do all that. So he's going to handle with that. He'll do a little bit more of the budgeting aspect, help with that, to figure out a training budget, that we can have a plan put together. And then there was something else that I just walked way out of my mind now. Yeah. Yeah. With Lexipol, our policies, we talked about in the 5 pillars of the policies. We're redoing all of our policies. So he's got to spearhead that. I mean, that's an animal there. With the state laws, the NFPA standards, and federal law changing every day for the jobs we do, those are an ongoing monster, and we pretty much want to reconstruct them from the ground up.
Okay.
Everything we have is kind of getting to that point where it's antiquated, doesn't really reflect the way we do business today. So that's going to be a giant endeavor on its own right there.
Going back to the description of the training that you gave us, and clearly we can't invest too much in training, not just for the good of individual firefighters, but for the good of the citizens who are serviced by those firefighters. And I think you alluded to this, but just to make clear, this individual will have some training responsibilities, not just for fire suppression activities, but for the medical component of
Absolutely. Yep. He's going to oversee all training 100% for everybody.
Okay.
So.
And then when you talk about the internal process for filling the position, you know, you did a good job of summarizing the process. Do you have a rough guess on how long it'll take to identify, select, and put in place the individual who will assume this position?
We'd like to have it done in just a couple weeks.
Okay. And then that ripple effect that both you and the controller mentioned with regard to then having most likely to add somebody in the ranks. Can you highlight for us, or I guess summarize for us and the citizens following the meeting, what the time frame is for us to replace that body and to add that additional firefighter to our ranks?
So we've already had our written test for this year. Our physical agility test, the CPAT, starts February 16th. I think that ends on March 5th is the last day for that. Once those numbers are done, we get the list of who've passed all that. We usually try to schedule interviews, the first round of interviews within the next 2 weeks. So we'd like to have them on board. We have our first retirement going in March, and our second one will be in June. We'd like to have the people put them, and then this one will be in place where the couple of them come on well before June, by May, we'd like. And then we'll have to bring the person on in June when they retire, because we can't bring them on before the person's gone. But this one will be on as soon as possible. So we're already in the hiring process now. So there's nothing special we got to do. It just adds another number to the person we want to bring on.
So it sounds like you have 3 identified looming vacancies that you're
Yep.
going to fill, including this new one that would be the ripple effect of
Yep.
creating the new position.
Yep.
All right.
So hopefully by June we'll have it all wrapped up and moving on.
Absolutely. Mr. Emmons?
Yeah, Chief, would you give me the dates again for you said the test,
The CPAT, the first day, the orientation day is February 16th, and the last day is March 5th. They have a couple days in between there. I'd have to look up, it's like the 23rd and 25th. So they come to orientation day, you get explained what it is, you can go through the test, you can take some practice rounds through the 16th, 23rd and 25th, I believe. I think the 27th, and then March 5th. So on the March 5th is the final test day. If you do not pass by March 5th, you have to pass on March 5th.
that's the written test?
No, the written test is done. We did that in January.
Okay, so you're talking about the agility test?
Yeah.
And that's, the dates again, February
16th.
16th
Yep.
to March
Yeah.
5th. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Mamalenti?
Just want to tell Chief, now's a good time to probably tell Woody he's aged out of the application
Yeah,
process.
but you're 39, it was 36 is the cutoff.
41.
41, no, that's close.
Give the man a chance, Mr. Mamaleti. Give the man a chance. Any other questions for Chief Woodward? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else physically present who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? If you would, please come forward.
Hi, Frank Zappia, President, Mishawaka Professional Firefighters, Local 360. I'm also here to speak in favor of adding the new position of assistant chief of training. Excuse me. It's not one of our union positions, so the fact that I'm up here speaking for it, shows a need for the position. That being said, everything that Chief Woodward said, 100% accurate for the need for this position. To piggyback a little bit off of what Mr. Compton had said earlier, though, it's something that we've brought up time in and time out in negotiations with city administration. The people on the trucks, that number doesn't really go up. The times that it's gone up has been when we went to 3 platoon because we needed to make sure we had the same amount of people on the trucks. When we brought on our 3rd ambulance to fill those holes. And, even a few years ago, we went from 2 assistant chiefs to 3 assistant chiefs. We promoted a battalion chief of EMS that was actually riding on an ambulance day in and day out to create that assistant chief's position, which was, again, well needed. But that didn't really, add to our numbers on the trucks. We've also got 3 fire marshals who their workload is very extensive. So, the city's adding 1 position to the department for a training chief. It's a lot easier to get 1 approved than it is to get 3 approved. That's another place that we could look to add a position. Mayor Wood says each year in the state of the city about the world-class service. I serve along with the best brothers and sisters you could ask for here on the Mishawaka Fire Department. That being said, we've had 4 fire stations in the city of Mishawaka since 1929. In the process of getting plans together for a new Station 2, which is, way past its prime. But again, 4 stations for 93 years. Those manpower increases just haven't been there. Equipment, we do have good equipment, and we appreciate that. But getting people on the trucks, we've got 2 fire engines that have 4 people on it, 2 with 3. We'd love to see those 2 engines, those 2 additional engines come up to 4 people on each truck. Again, I know it sounds like I'm not talking against this. I'm just stating the need that we've been asking for many years for our manpower. And, we discussed in our negotiations this year how we asked for 18 additional manpower. And you guys looked at Chief Woodward and said, Chief, is that accurate? And he said no. Said that we were underselling it, that he would take 24 to 30 today. So, and I know money, money, money. Getting all that together, it takes time. And, over the course of a few years, he also mentioned our call numbers. We're talking about putting a 4th AMBO in, hopefully sooner than later. I worked an overtime shift the other day, ended up my work shift and then my regular shift. One of the guys I work with every day did the same thing. He was on the ambulance, on our slowest ambulance in the city. In 48 hours, he made 23 calls. So that's almost a call, every 2 hours. And from start to finish of a call, excuse me, for the AMBO, you're talking an hour for an easy call because of the time that they have to do the report and transport the patient to the hospital. So again, that just shows the numbers that are going up for these calls and everything. Again, it goes chief of training, a need. Getting more people out to do inspections of these properties and getting people on the fire trucks and ambulances to help our citizens. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk and support this, but also plead our case to add additional manpower throughout the rest of the department. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for President Zappia? Thank you for your comments. And you know this from, prior conversations that we've had and as a group and individually. But, and you've heard yet again tonight that, I feel very safe in saying that the council stands ready, as it has for many years, to partner with the administration and with our firefighters with regard to any issues related to manpower. As you know, that others don't always realize, whether it is additional police officers that we hear about at neighborhood meetings or additional firefighters that we're hearing about this evening, those type of recommendations have to be initiated by the administration. The council, as the fiscal body, can certainly partner with the administration and work that into the budget, but it has to start with a proposal that's made at that podium to add manpower. So we appreciate your comments. Hopefully you've heard tonight that there is great interest on the part of the council to partner with everybody involved to make that happen. But thank you for your support of the matter that's directly in front of us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? If so, please come forward. Then is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Is there anyone present in the chamber who wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed ordinance? And is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed ordinance? Are there any council members who wish to speak? Hearing none, then I will call for the question.
Question?
Madam Clerk, would you please poll the council?
Mrs. DeMade?
Yes.
Mr. Hazen?
Yes.
Mr. Mamalenti?
Yes.
Mr. Benicki?
Yes.
Mr. Emmons?
Yes.
Mr. Belovich?
Yes.
Mr. Compton?
Yes.
Mr. Hixenbaugh?
Yes.
Proposed ordinance passes 8-0. Proposed ordinance number 2022-04. An ordinance amending Chapter 137 of the Municipal Code of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana, as from time to time amended, commonly known as the zoning ordinance of 1966 of the City of Mishawaka, Indiana. This is to rezone from R1 residential to R3 residential for 8 residential homes and accessory building at the northeast corner of East Jefferson and Maplehurst Avenue for Trooptown. The petitioner has requested that this be postponed until the first meeting of March.
Thank you. Mr. Compton?
Make a motion that we honor the petitioner's request and postpone this to the first meeting in March.
Second.
Second?
Thank you. A motion has been made and seconded to postpone the second reading and public hearing on proposed ordinance 2022-04 until our first regular meeting in March. Madam Clerk, do you have that specific date handy?
I do. Did you want me to say what that date is?
Please.
First meeting in March is March 7th.
March 7th. Any additional questions or comments from the council on the motion to postpone? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The matter will be postponed until our regular meeting of March 7th, 2022. Thank you. And with that, we will move into privilege of the floor. At this time, members of the public are invited to the podium to speak with respect to non-agenda items only under privilege of the floor.
Can you guys hear me through my mask?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, I'm Mary Sisti, S-I-S-T-I. Address 1127 East Borley Avenue. And I'm just speaking on behalf regarding Trooptown as a whole. It's not speaking directly related to the rezoning processes of north or south. I'm just putting it out there. I first want to thank the council for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight, and also thank my neighbors who are present this evening, who don't feel comfortable standing up to speak for themselves, to allow me the opportunity to present on their behalf. Please feel free to interject me if you need to add to or are in opposition to what I will be touching on tonight. Since the last meeting in January, I've had the opportunity to gather my thoughts, write down questions, and attempt to seek clarity from our district council representative, Mike Compton. Recently, I've reached out to our mayor, Dave Wood, to ask if he would be present tonight so we can clear both sides, but he told me that it was going to be a motion for continuance, so he'll be coming in March, hopefully. Deb Fleming, our county commissioner, is too in opposition to the development of Trooptown being established in both locations. I hope she will get the opportunity to speak and be heard regarding her concerns as well come the next council meeting. I also spoke directly with Jim, the Trooptown representative, last Friday evening to try and see if the neighbors can get the opportunity to sit down with him and go over the business proposal we feel is unclear and vague. He was very receptive to the idea, and I'm just waiting on a date for us to come together. Lastly, my husband Jason and I have attempted on our days off from work to go door to door and have these conversations with the neighbors who up until 24 hours ago, they are still left in the dark about Trooptown. This has been a month-long, time-consuming journey filled with a roller coaster of emotions, of confusion and frustration, but I am committed to the process of working with those involved to make this a better process for all. I'm hoping for a more grassroots community effort versus it feeling like a rush, institutionalized agenda. So I'm going to get right to it. From last month's council meeting and from what Mike Compton stated to me, you say it's important for the community surrounding Trooptown to accept and welcome this plan in order for this to be fully approved. Yet only those within the 300-foot radius were supposedly notified. And yes, I am aware that this is a state law and that's all that's required. But in my opinion, for what it's worth, it's not ideal for this specific situation. Mayor Dave Wood even stated in his email to me, and I quote, "It has been my experience being involved with Mishawaka government for 22 years as a councilman and now mayor that our local representatives do a good job of listening to neighbors and taking their views into account. It has always been a priority and it sets the Mishawaka apart." End quote. He also went on to say he was notified back in May of 2020 of the Trooptown proposal and that it received a unanimous vote that passed the council. He stated at that public hearing, no neighbors came out to oppose the project and the rezoning passed. As you can assume, it was surprising and disappointing to hear my fellow neighbor who lives within this 300-foot radius wasn't notified of Trooptown until after it was approved, much after this 5/2020 date. I will let her speak on her own volition, but do you see how this may come off as setting a double standard to the neighbors? To hear you say you want to hear our views, and yet we never had the chance to even be involved from the beginning. I personally was notified back on December 27th of 2021 by a random petition letter opposing Trooptown right before the January council meeting. I can come to you with my concerns regarding why at this time the majority of my neighbors and myself are having difficulty accepting Trooptown in between 3 housing developments and 2 parks, but this would be putting the cart in front of the horse. The meeting scheduled last week, Sunday, between Trooptown and the neighbors got canceled. So again, a rain check date will be in order, hopefully before the next council meeting set for March 7th. In the meantime, I will make sure to continue to work directly with Jim Method from Trooptown and to notify and keep the neighbors up to date with this proposed meeting. I am hoping a lot of our questions will be addressed then, and we will be all on the same page by this council gathering, by the next council gathering. If in the case we meet with Trooptown and still share the same concerns, I want to ask this council board meeting, or this council board remains open to the possibility of revisiting the original unanimous vote for rezoning. I understand this is asking you to do something unprecedented. However, we, the neighbors, are encouraging all 9 board members representing this community to hear us out both individually and as a group, to allow the opportunity to hold at least some stake on what is being developed in our backyard, and to cast your vote after you heard us out. I would like to ask you put a pause, not a stop, but a pause on any future plans, votes to the future developments of this project, no matter what site you're looking at, until the neighbors have the opportunity to directly meet with Trooptown. In short, us neighbors are simply trying to seek clarity here, get the opportunity to have these crucial conversations with Trooptown, and let our voices be heard, and to revisit the voting process. I feel like this council board owes us at least that much if we are to be expected to be open to the idea of this new development. Thank you so much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Thank you for your comments. I know if that's the first time you've ever done it, it's a little bit of a daunting task, and you
It's
did a
very-
nice job with it, especially with a mask on, so you did
Yeah.
well. A couple things, and again, yeah, I think we all appreciate the passion that you bring to this issue and the thoughtful comments that you've made. I'll try to address a couple of your specific concerns.
Yeah,
And
please.
this is the beginning of a discussion, not the end of
Please,
it.
yes.
But I will tell you that from my perspective, and I'll certainly consult with our council attorney, but my opinion as an attorney is that there isn't a ready-made ability under Indiana law for us to revisit a decision that was made last year. We have the ability under our council rules to be able to revisit something that is approved at the next council meeting, but clearly we're past that, and we couldn't go back that far in time. But that's not to say that the dialogue and the discussion and the clarification of issues that you're talking about shouldn't occur, that pause, if you will. And I think, quite frankly, what happened this evening is consistent with that pause.
Yeah.
And I would be shocked if the fact that we're not hearing this matter this evening isn't directly related to Mr. Compton advocating for that kind of pause and for these issues to be better fleshed out. And if a neighborhood meeting is appropriate, I'm confident that that'll happen. And that's the way for people who live, in many instances, for people who live beyond that artificial 300-yard requirement that state law embeds, to have an opportunity to pick up more information about a proposal and to have a chance to say what they think. So I'm hopeful that that process will play out in everybody's best interest, including yours and us as a council. But one thing I can commit to you on is that, having served on this council and with these people up and down the row here for some time, we take great pride in being very open-minded about every issue that comes in front of us, including this one. So what happened in the past may be done, but that's not to say that some of the concerns, quite frankly, I think all of the concerns that you've expressed are going to have a fair opportunity to be vetted out as part of the process. But you can absolutely rest assured, and I would challenge anybody, not you, but anybody who wanted to step to the microphone and try to cite for me an example of where we as a council have been closed-minded on an issue like this, because in having served here for a while, I'm not aware of one time where that's happened. So I look forward to, I think we look forward to working with you and the other residents of the surrounding neighborhood on this. Hopefully, we can have a good dialogue, whatever the final decision is, about what this project looks like, how it would play out, and how it's in the best interest of the community, which is ultimately what drives all of our decisions here. But thank you again for your thoughtful comments and the points that you've made this evening, and I'm confident that we'll have a chance for more interaction moving forward.
Great. That's all I'm asking
All right.
for. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak under privilege of the floor, if you would, please come forward to the podium. Then is there anyone participating remotely who wishes to speak under privilege of the floor? Thank you. With that, we will move into unfinished business, of which there is none. New business. Is there any new business to come before the council? Mr. Emmons.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder that the West End Neighborhood Meeting will be held on Thursday, February 17th, and our guest speaker will be Mr. Joe Van Neville, which is the Director of Code Enforcement. He'll be there that evening to update everybody on code, what the guidelines are, and answer any questions that you may have. So that is February 17th at 7 o'clock at St. Babel's. So look forward to having everybody there. And as usual, we'll have the baked goods from West End Bakery there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Benicki?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank Debbie in the mayor's office. Had to call her this morning because we had some streets on the northwest side that weren't plowed until today. And that was a little disturbing considering so many people drive down them. I've heard of people getting warnings for these sidewalks undone, but what about the city not doing their due diligence? Also, during the snowstorm, we had problems with trash service. We still have, on the northwest side, just trash containers everywhere with trash in them. The trash service was supposed to come out either, Friday, Saturday, and pick them up, and they still haven't. As I drove here this evening, I drove down Colfax Avenue, other streets, and now they're getting knocked over by snowplows and things like that. So I'm hoping that somebody at the city level can reach out to this trash company and get this squared around before it gets worse and worse and worse, and then we're going to have trash all over the streets. So I just wanted to point that out, and if there's anybody that's got problems, I would call the mayor's office, 574-258-1601. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benicki. Mrs. DeMaid?
Thank you, Mr. President. Following on Mr. Emmons's reminder, I also have a reminder about this month's West End Neighborhood Watch meeting. It's tomorrow, Tuesday, February 8th, at St. Bavo's in the school activity room. This month, we have former Mishawaka Police Chief, not this one, but Mr. George Obrin, who will join Mishawaka Police Officer Bruce Faltinsky in the discussion on policing then versus now. And what's changed in policing, what hasn't, how do you work in the old ways of pre-technology compared to today's information overload? It should be a pretty interesting conversation. The meeting will be live streamed on the West End Neighborhood Watch Facebook page, and those unable to attend can watch it on that platform. Parking is in the parking lot on the south side of the church, and the meetings are held for 1 hour from 7 to 8. And this meeting is open to all residents of the city of Mishawaka. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Emmons?
Yeah. I'd hope the South Bend Tribune would put it in the paper for the February 17th meeting at St. Babel's. They could put that in the paper. I'd greatly appreciate that. I failed to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emmons. Any other new business to come before the council? Mr. Compton?
Yeah, Mr. President, thank you. I'm not sure who to thank, but I got zoning and planning emails, agenda. Thank you, Ms. Clerk. And that's the first time I remember getting those. And I know we requested those recently. So that's very helpful, I think, I know to myself, and I'm sure to the remainder of the council. I know this, on another subject, I know Trooptown is a contentious issue. I've thought a lot about this. I thought a lot about what Jefferson was 10 years ago. And there were 2 trailer parks there with shootings in them and things going on that were really detrimental to the neighborhood. And while the city wasn't direct in cleaning that area up, they were certainly behind the scenes. There's a mental hospital that's within a half a mile from that neighborhood. A behavioral health mental hospital that most people don't even know it's there. It's down by the river. And now we have an opportunity to help veterans. Everybody wants to help veterans until it comes time to help the veterans in a situation like this. For the life of me, that part I don't understand. People fly their flag in their front yard, but don't want to support this. I don't understand that. Now, I've listened. I will continue to listen. I did what I thought we would be, I worked to do what I thought was an acceptable answer, which was move this out of the neighborhood and back across the street to resolve some of the questions of right next door to me, and I understand those questions, I do. But now to continue to hear the resistance when, and I'll help support meetings, but I'm not sure there's anything that's going to resolve not in my backyard. I just don't think there's anything that's going to resolve that. So I don't know. I'm really at a loss as to how to feel about this and how to approach this. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Compton, and thank you for your work on this issue. I know from prior conversations that you have devoted a significant amount of time to this, as you always do to issues in your portion of the city, and we appreciate the work that you've done to this point and will continue to do on this issue. Any other new business to come before the council? Hearing none, then a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.